The colleagues, thanks for the opportunity. So far, you've been very lucky to listen to some very interesting presentations given by very good, best experts of BFRAME. Now I will give you another presentation, which will be quite boring one. Very sorry for that, I apologize for that, because it's about a topic which is, I'm afraid that most of you are sick of that. It is the concept of work. And I will talk about work concept in bibliographic models from a practical or catalog viewpoint, or much rather it's from the viewpoint of someone who trains colleagues about library reference model and BFRAME, and who tries to make them be familiar with these new entity-based models and so on. So I don't know how it is in your countries. It is very typical in Hungary that if you choose library studies at university as your first subject, then you choose philology or linguistics or literature or something like that. And maybe it has something to do with the fact that each time when I try to talk about work, try to explain it, I try to say that it's something like a functional entity to group or collect the exceptions or instances in the BFRAME model. There is someone who raises the question, okay, but what is work about at all? What it is actually? So that it takes a long time to explain it. The question is, and I guess it's a relevant question, what is a work actually, and what is its description about? What is the source of metadata? And yes, just before responding to these questions, I tried to, I will quote here Richard P. Smilaglia, who wrote it in 2001, that there is as yet no commonly accepted definition of the concept of a work. And I guess that we can add that it has not changed since then. So work is something that you can devote a 50-minute presentation at any time, because this issue remains relevant over time. So first of all, let's have a look at the BFRAME, the well-known BFRAME model. As you can see, I highlighted some phrases here because I will use I've utilized them to define a new entity, which is actually a virtual entity in RDA, and it is the representative expression. So the problem, what I would like to suggest here, what I was suggested by my colleagues as for the approach. So the work came alive when being embodied. So it cannot be separated from its form. The colleagues found this concept of work, which we found in FLBR previously, too, how to say, too fuzzy, too misty to grasp. So, and they said that let's see how work came to alive, and work came alive when being embodied. Of course, in the bibliographic universe, as I mentioned before, first and foremost, it is a functional entity to group expression and instances, depending on the model we apply. But we can say that in one or other sense, representative expression, which was introduced by the library reference model, is for reconciling these different approaches I mentioned here. So I already mentioned that I would use BFRAME definitions to define representative expression, and this is what I suggest, that material embodiment of conceptual essence could be this new definition for representative expression. Representative expression is a work that is captured in an instance, or so they live in symbiosis, I can say. It might be more precise to say in other way, in library reference way, that it is a work captured in a manifestation. And I have to add that it is nothing but the first edition or the canonical manuscript of the work, which means that a more philological approach was applied here. I'm also referring here to Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, which is, of course, only hypothesis, but it comes handy to affirm this approach. So here, let's have a look at, let me quote the new, very fresh object-oriented LRM model, which affirms this approach. It says that in the FRBR, object-oriented FRBR model, the entity type F27 work conception implicitly put the emphasis on the beginning of the creation process, the spark of inspiration. As you remember, entity was something very abstract thing. And the 27 work creation in the new object-oriented LRM model, on the other hand, comprises activities by which instances of F1, the work, come into existence. So in many cases, work creation coincides with the existence of the first known complete expression of that work. Yes. So here you can see some essential representative expression elements taken from the RDA model and mapped to the BFRAME elements. We can see that there is no need to create a representative expression entity in BFRAME. Instead of that, I suggest to record attributes of representative expression as data on work. I mean, attributes of representative expression are ones of those of the first edition or the canonized manuscript, if there is one. This way, data of work in a BFRAME sense will be the data of virtual entity representative expressions in the RDA sense. In a library reference model, representative expression attributes are suggested to be taken from a representative or canonical expression of the work. In scope notes, you can read the values of these attributes are inferred either from particular expressions considered to best represent the work, or from characteristics abstracted from a more or less nebulous network of similar expressions. Sounds great, but my question is that who should be the one who identifies relevant values of relevant expressions? I guess that it is much more a task for a philologist than a librarian. So as we saw before, the definition of representative expression is a combination of definitions belonging to two different entities in the BFRAME model. What we also realize is that there is no need for correcting elements, because elements which belong to either other entities than work in other models, such as language and extent, can be used with work as well in the BFRAME. So what I am suggesting to do is defining representative, representative expression attributions as work elements on the level of the cataloging policy, at least. So catalogers could have a starting point when cataloging data on work. I have to add that, as we saw it before, according to library reference model, the representative expression attributes do not necessarily belong to one single expression. It could belong to a network of expressions as well. Such an approach might be applied where resource descriptions are made by researchers or experts of the specific area, philologists, music historians, and so on. Yes. So, just a moment. Let's see how to integrate representative expression into BFRAME, if you want to do so. I suggest as a goal to deprive work of its abstractness by using this representative expression attributes to describe it. I think there is no need to correct or adjust the model, as I mentioned before. It needs to be emphasized on the level of cataloging policy, as I also mentioned before, that the source of the description of the resource is the material embodiment of the conceptual essence, which is the representative expression, which is the canonical manuscript or the first edition of the work. Or when researchers' knowledge is at disposal, various expressions could be considered to be the sources of representative expression attributes. It's the same in other words. So let's see now how to keep abstractness after all, which road leads us to some kind of superwork concept. There are two approaches as phrased here. In narrow sense, work covers Romeo and Juliet, the literary work, and its translations, also literary works, including translations of translations, which in library of reference model sense, derivations of the expressions of the same work. In this sense, work is a purely functional entity to group related expressions and instances. In broad sense, a work involves Romeo and Juliet, the literary work, and its translations, which are also literary works, and the West Side Story, the musical, which is based on Romeo and Juliet, and the movie by Zeffirelli with the same title. In this sense, work is an access point to the network of related catalog resources. So it is the work in the narrow sense, according to library reference model. As you see, a work is an abstract entity, okay? The essence of the work is the constellation of concepts and ideas that form the shared content of what we define to be expression of the same work. And the work is perceived through the identification of the commonality of content between and among various expressions. So, these are the elements to use according to LRM, the library reference model, if you want to realize the work in the broad sense via the entity relationships. It's some of them, for example, is inspiration for example, Romeo and Juliet is inspiration for West Side Story, and the film, the movie, is a transformation of the drama, and so on. And it is the network of expression and abstract functionality of the work. Here you can see the network of works and expressions, which make up an abstract work. So work does not need to be an abstract entity to function as an abstract entity throughout the network of expressions belonging to itself, the work one, and its inspirations, such as the work two, and transformations, such as the work three, and maybe it's much better with some data in it. So that was all I wanted to say. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions, that's my email address. Thank you.